Just take a moment to start to arrive. Maybe place your hand on your chest. Maybe place both hands on your chest. Maybe place one hand on your belly. Just start to feel the rise and fall of your chest and your belly with your breath. Feel your belly expand like a balloon on your inhale. On exhale, feel the release. Start to lengthen your breath on the inhale and on your exhale. If you're seated, come down to lying on your back. Stretch your arms overhead, stretch your toes out. Come into a nice morning stretch. Walk your feet to the right side of your mat and your hands to the right side of your mat. Maybe cross one ankle over the other. Feel the stretch in your left side body. And come back to center. Slowly start to walk your feet over to the left side of your mat. Start to walk your hands over to the left side of your mat. Maybe cross one ankle over the other. And come back to center. Hug your right knee into your chest. Give it a nice hug. Lay your right leg back on the mat. Hug your left knee into your chest. And extend it back on the mat. Hug both knees into your chest. Just take a moment here. You can either stay in stillness or maybe rock side to side. That feels good. Stretch both legs towards the ceiling. You can start to point and flex the toes. Maybe roll your ankles from side to side. And come back to stillness. Bring your right ankle over your left knee. Reach behind your left thigh and bend your knee. Come into a figure four stretch. Hands can be behind the left hamstring or the top of the shin. Stay here for 2 more cycles of breath. And release both knees down to both feet down to the mat. You can windshield wiper your legs from side to side. And come back to stillness. Hug both knees into your chest. Extend both of your feet towards the ceiling. Bring your left ankle over your right knee. Bend your right leg. Grab behind for your right hamstring or shin. Come into a reclined figure four. Take a moment to assess how this feels in your left hip. And just breathe and soften in. Stay here for 2 more deep breaths. And release both feet to the mat. You can windshield wiper your knees from side to side, or stay in stillness in the middle. And come back to stillness. Hug both knees into your chest. You can stay here or you can rock side to side. And when you're ready, you can rock and roll up to a seated position. Come up to tabletop. Bring your big toes together and walk your knees out to the side of the mat. Come back into a child pose. Forehead can rest on the mat. You can stay here or bring your palms together in a prayer position and bring your thumbs to rest on your neck. You can stay here or walk your elbows a little more forward. Feel a stretch in your triceps and your shoulders. Stay here for 2 more cycles of breath. If you have your thumbs on your neck, go ahead and release your hands back down in front of you. You can slowly start to rise up. Bring your head off the mat. Keep your left hand on the mat. Reach your right arm overhead and thread your arm through your body. You can rest your head on the mat. Stretch your left arm out in front of you. Gaze should be over your right fingers. Stay here for 3 more cycles of breath. Soften in. Slowly start to rise up and place your right hand back in front of you. Come back into a child's pose. Rest your head on the mat. Start to bring your head off the mat. Keep your right hand down on the mat. Reach your left arm overhead. Thread it through. Rest your head back down on the mat. Stretch your right arm out in front of you. Gaze over your left fingers. Stay here for 3 more cycles of breath. Start to lift your chest off the mat and reach your left arm in front of you. Come back to child's pose. Take 1 big deep breath here. And on your exhale, slowly start to rise up to tabletop. Make sure your wrists are in line with your shoulders, knees and hips are in line. You can stay here or slowly start to rotate your hips. Invite some movement into your hips, moving from side to side. And reverse it. And come back to neutral spine. Take a big deep breath in here. And on your exhale, look over to your right hip. Squeeze in. And come back to center. Look over to your left hip and come back to center. And go to your right and back to center. And to your left and back to center. Find stillness in the middle. Come down onto your elbows. Bring your hands together, or you can leave your hands down on the mat, palms down, whichever feels more comfortable for you. Tuck your toes. Slowly start to rise your hips up and come into a dolphin pose. You can stay here, or you can slowly walk your feet towards your hands. If that's too intense for you, you can back off. Walk your feet back. At any point, you can drop back down and come into tabletop. Stay here for 2 more deep breaths. Bring your knees back down to the mat. Push back to child's pose. Stay here for 2 deep breaths. And come back to tabletop. Bring your right foot behind you. You can have the option to stay here or lift your right leg off the mat. Option to stay here or stretch your left arm out in front of you. Tighten through the core. You can flex your right foot, stretch out through, find balance and stability. Stay here for 2 more cycles of breath. And release your hand and knee back to the mat. Stretch your left leg behind you. You can stay here or lift the left leg off the mat. Maybe bring your right arm out in front of you. Tighten through the core. Find your strength and stability. Push out through the sole of your foot. Stay here for 2 more deep breaths. And release back down to the mat. Again, stretch that right leg out behind you. You can stay here or bring your right leg up behind you. You can bring that left arm out in front of you, or you have the option to reach around and grab for that foot. It takes a lot of strength and stability. If you have your foot in your hand, push out through the top of your foot. Should feel a nice stretch in your left shoulder, left chest. Stay here for 2 more deep breaths and release. Take a big deep breath here in tabletop and stretch your left leg out behind you. Again, you have the option to stay here. You can come back out, bringing your right arm in front of you, left leg behind you, or you have the option to reach around, grab that foot, push out through the top of your foot. Strengthen through your core. Stay here for 2 more cycles of breath. And release. You can go ahead and push back to a child's pose. Slowly come back to tabletop and come into a seated position. Ground down through your sit bones. Sit up nice and tall. Find a moment of stillness here. Stretch your legs out in front of you. Come into stack pose. Bring your right knee into your chest. You have the option to stay here, or you can bring your right foot over to your left and you can grab your leg and bring your right arm behind you. A nice twist. On each inhale, grow nice and tall through the crown. And on each exhale, twist a little deeper. Stay here for 3 more cycles of breath. And slowly come back to center. Stretch both legs out in front of you. Go ahead and bring your left knee into your chest. Option to stay here, or you can step your left foot over to the outside edge of your right thigh. You can wrap your right arm around your left leg and bring your left arm behind you. Place your hand on the mat, gaze over your shoulder. And soften in. On each inhale, sit up nice and tall. And on each exhale, just a little deeper. Take 2 more deep breaths here. And come back to center. You can release your legs. Stretch your feet out wide. Come into a wide leg seated position. Ground down through your sit bones. Sit up nice and tall. Inhale, reach your arms overhead. Exhale, slowly bow forward. If this is too much, you can walk your hands back in, back off a little. Or if you're looking for a little more, you can walk your hands out. Stay here for 3 more cycles of breath. And start to walk your hands back in towards your body. Sit up nice and tall. Rotate your shoulders and your torso towards your right toes. Inhale, reach your arms overhead. Exhale, bow forward. Your hands can come to the sole of your foot, to your shin. You can bring your hands down to the mat. If this is too much, you can sit up and just twist to the side. You find the position that works for you. We're going to stay here for 3 more cycles of breath. Slowly walk your hands back in. Come up to a seated position. Turn your shoulders and your torso to the left toes. Inhale, reach your arms overhead. Exhale, bow forward. You can reach for the sole of your foot. Bring your hands to the mat. If your right hip is coming off the mat, just back off slightly till it's grounded. Stay here for 3 more deep breaths. And rise back up, come up to a seated position, come back to center. You can bring your legs together. You can come back up, cross your shins, come up to tabletop. You can slowly rise up, bring your hands to your hips. Your hips should be over your knees. Time to adjust the clothes if you need to. And we're going to bring our right leg out to the side. Toes can be pointing towards the long side of your mat or out towards the short side of your mat, whichever is more comfortable for you. Have options here. And we're going to slowly start to bring our right hand down our right leg. You have the option to stay here, or you can extend your left arm overhead. If this is too much for you, bring your hand back down to your hip, or you can bring your arm across to your rest on your right shoulder. You should feel a nice stretch in the left side body. Stay here for 2 more deep breaths. Bring your hand back down to your hip. Slowly start to rise back up to center. You can bring your left hand down to the mat or a block if you have it. Stay here or extend your right arm overhead. Stay here for 2 more deep breaths. If your arm is overhead, bring it back down to your hip. Slowly rise back up. You can bring your right knee back down to the mat. Extend your left leg out to the side. You have the option with your toes, whichever feels comfortable. It might be different on this side. Start to walk your left hand down your leg. Option to stay here or extend your right arm overhead. You can adjust your toes if whatever you're doing at the moment doesn't feel comfortable, or If you're curious, try the other way. See how it feels. Stay here for 2 more cycles of breath. If your arm is overhead, bring it back down to your hip. Slowly start to rise back up to center. Place your right hand down on the mat or a block if you have one. And you can stay here or extend your left arm overhead. Stay here for 2 more deep breaths. Bring your left hand back down to your hip. Slowly start to come back to center. Place your left knee on the mat. We're going to just take a mini back bend here. So if you want to, you can bring your hands down to your sacrum. Bring your elbows closer towards each other, almost like you're squeezing them in. Shoulders squeezing in together. And just slowly start to bend backwards. Hips should be pushing forward. Breathe here. And come back up to center. Release your hands. You can come back down to tabletop. Hands on the mat. Ground down through your hands. Tuck your toes. Start to lift your knees off the mat and push your hips up and back. Bring your heels down towards the mat. Come back into down dog. If this is your first down dog of the day, you can go ahead and pedal your feet if that feels comfortable. Maybe play around with coming up onto the balls of your feet and sinking your heels back down to the mat. Just take a moment to explore here. Maybe play a little, trying to get your heels closer down to the mat. Inhale, reach your right leg high in the air. Exhale, thread it through for low lunge. Take a moment here to ground down through the soles of your feet. Bring your hands to your hips, slowly start to rise up to high lunge. Find your stability, tighten through your core. You can reach your arms overhead, shoulders away from the ears. Take a moment to stay here. Find your breath. Anchor your left foot down. Slowly start to rotate open, come into warrior two. Settle in here. Flip your palm. Reverse your warrior. Come back into warrior two. Bring your hands back down to frame your front foot. Spin off your back heel. Place your left hand on the mat. Bring your right hand to your hip. Twist open to the side. Option to stay here or extend your right arm overhead. Stay here for 2 more cycles of breath. Bring your right hand back down to frame your foot. Step back to down dog. Stay here for one big deep breath in. Come up to high plank. You can slowly lower all the way down to the mat. Untuck your toes. Peel your chest off the mat. Come into cobra. Lower all the way down. Tuck your toes and push back to down dog. Extend your left leg high in the air. Thread it through for low lunge. Take a moment to settle in here, set up. Feel grounded down through your feet. Bring your hands to your hips. Slowly start to rise up. Find your strength and stability here. Tighten your core. And reach your arms overhead. Anchor your right foot down. Slowly come into warrior two. Settle in. Flip your front palm. Reverse your warrior. Slowly come back into warrior two. Windmill your hands back down to frame your front foot. Spin off your back heel. Keep your right hand on the mat. Bring your left hand to your shoulder. Slowly start to rotate to the left side. Option to stay here or extend your left arm overhead. Stay here for 2 more deep breaths. Bring your left hand back down to the mat. Ground down through your hands. Step back to down dog. Push forward to plank. You have the option to stay here, or you can take a chaturanga. Slowly lower down, come into cobra or up dog, and push back to down dog. Reach your right leg behind you. Exhale, thread it through for low lunge. Drop your left knee down to the mat, untuck your toes. You can slowly start to wiggle your right foot a little forward. Sink your right hip back. Come back into a runner's stretch. Toes can come off the mat. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, fold forward. Soften in. Feel the stretch in your right hamstring. Try to square the hips. Remember to breathe. Stay here for 3 more cycles of breath. Start to bend that front knee. Bring your hands back down to the mat. Untuck your toe or tuck your toes in the back. Start to lift off. Start to rise up to high lunge. Reach your arms overhead. Anchor your left foot down to the mat. Come into warrior two. Flip your front palm. Reverse your warrior. Come back into warrior two. Straighten your front leg. Slowly start to hinge at the hips. Come into triangle pose. Your right hand can come down to the mat, a block, or your shin, wherever you feel comfortable. Remember to have a micro bend in your right knee. Stay here for 2 more deep breaths. Start to bend into the front knee. Ground down through your feet. Slowly start to rise back up to warrior two. Flip your front palm. Reverse your warrior. Slowly start to come back up to warrior two. Windmill your hands back down to frame your front foot. Spin off your back heel. Root down through your hands. Step back to down dog. Extend your left leg behind you. Thread it through for low lunge. Drop your right knee down to the mat. Untuck your toes. You can walk your left toes front. Slowly start to sink your hips back. Toes can peel off the mat. Come back into a runner stretch. You can inhale, halfway lift here, and exhale, fold over the left leg. Soften in, feel the stretch in your left hamstring. Stay here for 3 more cycles of breath. Bend the front knee. You can tuck your right toes under, lift your knee off the mat, come back into low lunge. Find stability here. Ground down through your feet. Slowly start to rise up to high lunge. Reach your arms overhead. Remember to keep your shoulders away from your ears. Tighten through the core. Anchor your right foot down, come into warrior two. Settle in here. Remember to try to keep your knee tracking over towards your pinky toe. Flip your palm, reverse your warrior. Rise back up to warrior two. Straighten your front leg. Slowly start to hinge at the hips, bringing your left hand down to the mat, block, or your shin. Right arm overhead. Remember to keep a micro bend in your front knee. Try to stack your shoulders. Stay here for 2 more cycles of breath. And bend into your front knee. Ground down through your feet. Slow and controlled. Rise back up to warrior two. Flip your front palm, reverse your warrior. Come back into warrior two. Wimble your hands back down to frame your front foot. Spin off your back heel. Step back to down dog. Take a big, deep inhale here. And exhale, let it all go. You can walk your feet to your hands. Inhale, bring your hands to your shin, spine long, halfway lift. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale, extend your arms overhead. Exhale, bring your hands to heart center. Ground down through your left foot. Bring your right knee up. Stay here. Hug into the midline. Try to stay with me here. Try to bring your right ankle over your left knee and sink down into a standing figure four stretch. You can stay here, or you can slowly start to hinge forward and try to bring your armpit over your knee and over your ankle. Stay here for 2 more cycles of breath. Start to rise back up and bring your right foot back down to the mat. Go ahead and shake out your feet. Ground down through your right foot. Bring your left knee up. You can bring your hands to heart center. Stay here. Remember to hug into the midline. Try to hug that hip in on the right side. Stay up nice and tall. And bring the left ankle over the right knee. Slowly start to come into that standing figure four. Option to sink down lower or stay here. You can also try to bow forward, bringing your armpit close to your knee. Stay here for 2 more cycles of breath. And slowly start to rise back up. Place your left foot back on the mat. Go ahead and shake your feet out. Oh, and my head is cut off. Just take a big, deep breath here. You can reach your arms overhead. Exhale, bring your hands to heart center. We're going to come into dancer's pose. So you can bend your right knee. Your right hand is going to come to the inside of your right foot. And you can stay here, or you can extend your arm overhead, your left arm overhead. Option to stay here, or you can slowly start to come into dancer's pose. Pushing your top of your right foot into your right hand. Remembering to hug the midline. Stay here for 2 more deep breaths. And exhale, slowly start to rise back up. Release your right foot. Come into standing. Go ahead and shake that out if you need to. We're going to set up for dancer's pose on the left side. Grab your left foot with your right hand. Hand should be on the inside edge of your left foot. Extend your right arm overhead. Option to stay here, or slowly start to hinge forward and kick that left foot into your left hand. Stay here. Stay here for 2 more deep breaths. Slowly start to rise back up. Release your left foot. Bring your hands back down. Inhale, reach your arms overhead. Exhale, swan dive forward. Separate your feet hip distance. Slide the palms of your feet, or your palms of your hands, under the soles of your feet for Padangusthasana. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, fold forward. Stay here for 3 more cycles of breath. Exhale, release your hands. Heel toe your feet out to the outside edges of your mat. Heels can be slightly in, toes out wide. You can start to sink down. If this is as far as you can go, you can come here. Just bring your hands to your thighs, or you can sink all the way down to Malasana squat, yoga squat. Your elbows should be pushing on the outside edge of your, or the inside edge of your knees. Knees should be pushing into your elbows. Sink low, hands at heart center. Stay here for 3 more cycles of breath. Release your hands back down to the mat. Slowly start to rise up. Heel toe your feet together and fold forward. Inhale, bring your hands to shin, spine long, halfway lift. Exhale, fold forward. Root your hands down, step back to down dog. Lower your knees back down to the mat. Cross your shins, come into a seated position. Ground down through your sit bones. Place your soles of your feet on the mat. You can slowly start to come down onto your back. Keep the soles of your feet on the mat, knees pointing towards the ceiling. We're going to slowly come into bridge pose. So lift your hips off the mat, squeeze through your glutes. You have the option to stay here, or you can interlace your fingers and start to walk your shoulder blades together. Stay here for 3 more cycles of breath. If you have your hands interlaced, Go ahead and release your hands, release your shoulders, and slowly, one vertebrae at a time, lower down, bringing your hips down last. Take a moment here. We're going to take one more bridge. So you have the option to do exactly what we just did, or you can go ahead and take wheel if that's in your practice. If you'd like and you have a block, you can take a restorative bridge. Whatever you would like to do, go ahead and get set up for that now. I'm going to take a regular bridge. So ground down through the soles of your feet and slowly start to lift your hips off the mat. Tighten your glutes. If you'd like, you can interlace your fingers, walk your shoulder blades together. Soften in. Stay with me for 3 more deep breaths. If you have your fingers interlaced, release them. Walk your shoulder blades out and slowly lower all the way down to the mat. Go ahead and windshield wiper your knees from side to side. And find stillness in the middle. Hug both knees into your chest. You can stay here or maybe rock side to side. Hug your right knee in. Extend your left leg out long, like it's almost going to touch the mat, but not quite. Lift your head and neck off the mat, shoulders off the mat. Try not to strain your neck. We're going to do a few slow bicycle type crunches here. So just go ahead with your breath and switch whichever knee you have hugged in and rotate. And grab the left knee. Gonna do this for a few more cycles of breath. Tighten through your core. Stay with me for one more cycle on each side. Hug both knees into the chest. Go ahead and lower your head back down to the mat. You can rock side to side if that feels good. Extend both legs overhead. You are free to take your inversion of choice here. You can stay here and just keep your legs up. If you'd like to, you can grab a block, place it under your sacrum. You could put your feet against the wall. You could come into plow or shoulder stand. It's your option. We're going to stay here for about a minute. Go ahead and set yourself up for what feels good for you. Feel the weight of gravity working on your legs. You can feel free to explore different positions if one starts to feel like it's not serving you any longer. about 10 more seconds. Hug both knees into your chest. If you're in a position, come back down. Hug your knees into your chest. Bring your knees up, shins parallel to the ground. Extend both arms out to a T and drop your knees down to the right side of the mat. You can place your right hand on the outside edge of your left thigh. Gaze over your left shoulder. Stay here for 2 more deep breaths. Bring your knees back to center. Stay here for a moment and drop your knees down to the left side of your mat. Left hand can rest on the outside edge of your right thigh. Gaze over your right fingers. Stay here for 2 more cycles of breath. Start to bring your knees back to center. Hug your knees into your chest. Maybe rock side to side. Maybe grab the outside edges of your feet and come into happy baby. At this time, I invite you to do anything you still feel you need to do to prepare for Shavasana. And when you're ready, hug your knees into your chest and find a relaxing pose. You can either come down lying on your back, maybe on your side, maybe your legs are up the wall. If you have a bolster, you can place them under your knees. Whatever you feel comfortable with, settle in. Take a few moments and a few breaths here. Scan your body. Just take notice if anything has shifted mentally, physically. Do you feel lighter, heavier? Are you more calm? Assess how you feel right now in this moment. Just take a few deep breaths here. Feel the weight of the ground against your body. Relax it. Slowly start to deepen your breath. Maybe invite some movement into your fingers, into your toes. Maybe stretch your arms overhead. And when you're ready, hug your knees into your chest and roll onto your side. Take a moment here. Maybe take a deep breath. And when you're ready, come up to a seated position. Close your eyes and bring your hands to heart center. Take a moment to conjure up really good thought that's full of good energy. Your most loving thoughts. And let's send those out to everybody that needs that today. May it be someone that's sick, someone that's on the front lines, or just someone that needs just a little extra happiness in their life today. And now take a moment to thank yourself for showing up and practicing and taking a little slice of your Saturday for self-care. Thank you so much for sharing your practice with me. The light in me sees and honors the light in each one of you. Namaste.